In Lab 200 of the Docker workshop, we will explore more features of Docker and deploy a fully functional containerized version of the Alpha Office application touched upon in Lab 100. The application is made up of the following 4 containers. A data source, your choice of either Oracle 12c Enterprise Edition or MySQL database. A REST client to serve up data from the data source. A Twitter feed container consisting of static Twitter posts related to products in the data source. And finally, an Alpha Office UI container, which consists of a Node.js application that makes REST calls to the REST client and Twitter feed containers. You will also use various Docker commands to set up, run, and connect into containers. Concepts of Docker volumes, networking, and intra-container communication will also be covered. Let's start Lab 200 by establishing an SSH connection to the compute instance running in OCI. Let's open a terminal window, switch to the key directory, and issue the SSHI command as the user OPC. Once connected, we're going to verify the Docker engine is running by issuing the Docker command Docker version. Next, we need to clone a GitHub repository using the git command. Let's issue the command git clone. Once the repository is cloned, we will change the permissions on this directory to ensure that the Docker containers will have access to this directory. Next, we will establish a connection to the Docker Hub using our own personal Docker login account. If you haven't done so already, switch over to Docker Hub, establish an account, and then switch back and issue the Docker login command. Once connected, you should see the login succeeded message. Let's spin up a MySQL Docker container, which will represent the data source for our Alpha Office application. We'll do this by running the Docker run command. If you noticed in the Docker run command, the -v option, this maps the Git repository we downloaded earlier to a directory within the Docker container DB files. Once the Docker container is downloaded, extracted, and running, we can check the status of this Docker container by issuing the Docker ps command. Next, we want to monitor the creation of the default MySQL database by issuing the Docker logs follow MySQL command. As you will notice at the end, the MySQL database is ready for connections on port 3306. Once it is ready for connections, it's time for us to create some users and load some data. First, we're going to establish a bash connection to the MySQL Docker container by issuing the docker exec command. Once connected, we're going to switch to the DB files directory, and we're going to do a quick test on permissions. Since the permissions looks good, we're going to continue on with the setup of the Alpha Office MySQL database. To do this, we'll run the setup Alpha Office MySQL shell script. Once this is run, let's verify that we do have data and tables within MySQL. So let's connect to the MySQL database with the user root and the password Alpha Office 2017. Let's switch to the Alpha Office database by issuing the use command. Let's list the tables by issuing the show tables command. Finally, let's list the number of rows in the products table. You should see 57 rows in the products table. Now let's exit out of the MySQL command line interface. Let's also exit out of the Docker container. And finally, we're just going to list the Docker containers that are currently running by using the Docker PS command. Now let's deploy the remaining Docker containers which support the Alpha Office application. Let's start with the Twitter feed application running on port 9080. Once the container is downloaded, extracted, and running, we can verify the status of this container by issuing the Docker PS command. We can also check using the static tweets URL running on port 9080. Now let's spin up the REST client Docker container, issuing the Docker run command. As you can see, we are using the MySQL database as the data source this time. Since the Docker container is already downloaded locally, it's already been started. We can check that status by issuing the Docker PS command. Now let's jump over and check that in a browser by issuing the products URL on port 8002. You can also check the product URL for product 1025. We can see that that's working as well. And finally, we're going to deploy the Alpha Office UI Docker container. And that's running on port 8085. Again, it will download it, extract it, and then start it. And we can see all the Docker containers that are currently running by issuing the Docker PS command. Now we're going to switch over and test the Alpha Office UI URL on port 8085. And as you can see, the Alpha Office supply catalog comes up. We can click on one of the products, and you can see the tweets that have occurred. Now that all the Docker containers are deployed, let's walk through an in-place modification of the Alpha Office UI container. First, we're going to start with copying a file from our local compute instance into the Alpha Office container. Next, we're going to establish a connection to the Alpha Office UI container by issuing the Docker execute command. Once connected, we need to install a VI editor. So we're going to do an apt-get update first. Then we're going to perform an apt-get install of VIM. Once it's installed, we're going to do a quick check of the pipeline images directory just to confirm that the dark blue JPEG that we copied earlier is indeed in the directory. As you can see, it is there in the directory. So our first modification we're going to make to the Alpha Office UI application is we're going to update the alpha.html file using the VIM editor. And we're going to make a couple simple changes to this file. We're going to update the title in the heading. We're going to change the word listing to catalog. And then secondly, we're going to change the body title. And in this case, we're just going to add the name Steve to the front of the Alpha Office supply. Be sure to save your changes and close your file. The next change we're going to make is we're going to update the CSS file to leverage the dark blue JPEG that we copied into the container in a previous step. So towards the top, you're going to see a background URL. We're going to change the bg.jpg to the dark_blue.jpg. And again, be sure to save your file and close it. And then we're going to exit out of the container itself. Now that we've made our changes to the Alpha Office UI container, we'd like to commit those changes to a new Docker image. To do this, we'll use the docker commit command. And if you notice, we're committing it to the Docker Hub account of SK Nichols, and we're giving it a new name of Alpha Office-new. And if we issue the Docker images command, you'll see that there's a new locally stored image called Alpha Office-new. Now we want to see these changes, so we're going to implement a new Docker container off of the new image, but first we need to stop the existing one. So let's issue the docker stop Alpha Office UI command. This will stop the running Alpha Office Docker container. We're also going to issue the docker rm command, which will remove any files. Next, we want to start a new Docker container off of the new Alpha Office image that we just committed. So we're going to use a docker run command. We're still using port 8085. Again, we can check to make sure that the container is running by issuing the docker ps command. Next, we want to jump over to our browser and we want to refresh it to verify that the changes that we made to the HTML file and CSS file took. As you can see, the background is now a dark blue and the title says Steve's Alpha Office Supply. Our final step now is to take our new locally stored Alpha Office UI container image and push it up to our Docker Hub account. We're going to use the docker push command. Once the push is finished, we can then switch over to the Docker Hub website, log in with our personal Docker Hub account, and if we refresh the page, you will see that we now have a publicly available Alpha Office-new image. And this concludes Lab 200 of the Docker Workshop.